Hello, today we are talking everything progressive overload. You've probably heard this term before, and a lot of people just feel that has to involve going up in weight. That is one way to add progressive overload into the mix. But in today's video, we are going to discuss all the different ways, the methods, how to do it, how to incorporate different things depending on what you have access to and what your goals are. So that's where you really need to fine tune everything, is first and foremost understanding what your goals are. Not every single person is trying to build muscle mass. That is typically what you think about when you hear the term progressive overload. But in terms of the different options for improvement, hypertrophy obviously is muscle growth. You have your strength, your endurance, and your power. So most people who follow this platform are trying for hypertrophy as well as lean muscle mass building or fat burning alongside with hypertrophy. So before you even dive into all the ways, you really need to understand where you are currently at in your journey. And I say that time and time again. It doesn't matter if we're trying to manipulate your nutrition or your exercise. Whatever on paper makes sense for the average person might not be helpful for you. For instance, if I tell you that adding in a few additional movements into your regimen is going to help you, if I'm saying that to someone who's only doing an average of 4 movements per routine, yes, that's going to be helpful. But for someone who's already doing, maybe they're doing way too much and they're doing 15 movements per session, and I'm having them add in even more, that might be counterproductive to really aiding in reaching their goals. Okay. So there's always going to be nuances. There are always going to be caveats to everything. So I try to talk through those things when I do share information like this. But progressive overload is just gradually increasing stress on your body in a specific area for a specific purpose. So you can gain strength, gain muscle mass, gain endurance, maybe gain all of the above. Okay. So the primary variables of progressive overload, we have the load being the number one everyone always thinks about, increasing your weight. Number 2, increasing your volume. So your sets, your reps, of course, your weight, that's volume. Intensity, so the percentage of effort relative to the maximum. Okay. So if you are just putting forth way more intensity, you can see it in your workout. You can feel it in your workout. I always say if you work out without music and you're just kind of, in your basement going through the motions and you're tired versus, okay, I have the music blaring and I've got only so much time and I'm knocking it out and I'm putting forth all the intensity, you could just feel it in your body. Density. So more work completed in less time. Your frequency, you're training a muscle group more often, and complexity, increasing movement difficulty or coordination. So I always like to throw things into the mix when I program for individuals. And if you are still looking to increase any type of complexity, any type of just modality switch up, and you want customized programming, we do offer that. So you can see information below for that. But complexity, you can take an average movement, let's say a bicep curl, and you can be standing on a Bosu ball with one leg, and you can have one leg up, and you can be doing a unilateral movement with a slow eccentric on the way down with a faster on the way up, the concentric. So a lot of different ways that you can up the ante in terms of complexity, intensity, density. And, a lot of people will ask me, is it better to do supersets or to do just one movement, move on to the next, move on to the next? And that is part of this. So I'm going to scroll down. So supersets versus traditional. I just want to jump right to it because a lot of people do inquire about this. If we are being the most efficient at muscle building, which is better? Well, again, you go back to it's all relative. Whatever you are currently doing, you need to make it more challenging for your body. Okay. So if you are used to doing just standalone exercises and you do that, and then you rest for 2 minutes, and then you do it again, you rest for 2 minutes. In my opinion, I would never do that because I have never trained that way from the very start of my training. I have always either done supersets or trisets, 3 movements per circuit. That's just always been my methodology. That's the way I train women. I quite frankly feel that it would be absolutely miserable and very boring if I were to do a set of shoulder presses and then I rest for 2 minutes and then another set and then I rest and then I do a third and then I move on to the next. I don't feel that is an efficient way to spend my time. I would not ask my clients to do that. Time is of the essence. So I do feel more women are going to benefit, and men too, are going to benefit from supersetting. That's just my opinion. But if you do speak with people who come from a powerlifting world or, just in general, that's the method that they've used and they want to stick to that, that's totally fine. But even then, if your goal is fat burning and muscle mass building, we obviously need a huge chunk of our focus to be on the nutrition side of things. The exercise can only do so much. But with that, you really want to figure out, okay, how can I adjust this to be worth my while, to really challenge myself more than the week before and the week before and the week before? You're not always going to be able to progress in everything. That's just the reality of it. So you're going to have good days, you're going to have bad days. And sometimes it will not make any sense if you're someone who's tracking your progress, which is good. But I also say that with the caveat of understanding, is this going to be helpful to you mentally? Because if you see, oh, today I'm not able to lift nearly as heavy as I did last week on Tuesday. And, what in the world does that mean? Am I regressing? Am I going backwards? What am I doing wrong? And then you spiral and you feel like, well, hell, I'm just, this training isn't working. So I'm going to go eat a burrito and call it a day, So just understand that information is great, but also removing yourself from that because you might have not had enough food the day before. Maybe you did so much more output, meaning you were gardening, you took the dog for a walk, you were all over God's green earth with the kids. You were doing so many things. And today you didn't get good sleep. You don't have the fuel in your body. Your body's exhausted. That's the reason why you're not performing as well. And that's okay. So with the benefits of the supersets or doing the straight sets, it's pretty cut and dry. Like you pretty much know, okay, I am going up in weight. I'm giving myself enough time to rest and I'm able to really track easily. Now, when you add supersets into the mix, like I love, you are always switching things up. At least I program that way. So I'm never going to always have my superset be the same. I'm never going to, I'm not going to always say, well, with shoulder presses, I'm always supersetting with tricep press downs. I'm always doing a push-push, or I'm always doing a push-pull. I switch it up all the time. So that is my methodology for progressive overload, is constantly shocking my body and making my body guess and really stay strong from I got to keep up. I don't know what's coming. These are different combos. They're triggering different muscle fiber connections and all of that. So again, you can't go from straight sets to supersets and be able to cut your resting time down if you're coming from a 2-minute rest each set to okay, Sarah's asking me to go from the first movement And then she wants me to go to the second movement in 30 seconds, and then the third movement in 30 seconds, and then boom, because then your weight might have to go down. So we need to find that good sweet spot between, okay, I want you to keep your weight the same because I don't want you to superset to compromise the weight you can push. But we also need to cut that resting time down a bit, and we need to really progress yourself up to where little by little you can start moving faster through that superset and you can maintain that weight. And then pretty soon your muscular endurance is going to be there, your stamina, your strength, everything is going to be there to where when you're able to not only rest for a shorter amount of time, but now we're going to be able to bump that weight up a bit. So I always tell clients, if you have a superset, and the way, of course, I do it is with 3 movements, so it's a mini circuit, I always tell them, rest about 30 seconds, no more than a minute, between the first and the second movement. Do the same between the second and the third. And then you're going to do your 2-minute rest, if that's what you need, before you start that second full set. Okay. And same thing, smaller rest. And then before you start the third round, you're going to go back to a longer rest if that's what you need. You're always going to need a little bit more rest before your heavier compound lift, which typically I program that to be the first movement. So if you're doing pull-ups, you're not going to ever see me put bicep curls followed by push-ups followed by pull-ups. I'm always going to do the pull-up first, and then you do your accessory movements after. Same thing with lower body. I'm not going to have you do barbell squats after you do leg extensions and walking lunges, and then you go to squats. That's not the way I program. So I always keep the heavier compound lift at the beginning, and then you can, cut your resting time between the second and the third moves. And then when you come back around before that second round and third round of the heavy compound lift, that's when you do a longer rest, if that makes sense. Okay. So when you do use traditional sets, again, the goal is increasing your strength, lifting heavier loads. So for anyone who is really trying to improve on strength alone, then doing the set 1 traditional set, rest, that's the way to go. But again, many of you are not in that boat. So I feel supersets are definitely the way to go. So I'm going to scroll back up here and we're going to go through these specifics, because the progressive overload by your goal, of course, hypertrophy, number 1 goal. So mechanical tension, metabolic stress, muscle damage, followed by repair. This is huge. I see women in the gym all the time. They're trying to grow their big ass. They're trying to do all the booty hinges, and they're doing, all the thrusters and all the deadlifts, and they're in there about 5 times a week doing it. Ideally, you do not do the same muscle group back-to-back days, okay? Ideally, you take 48 hours of a rest off. That is going to give your body that repairing time. Remember, when we're lifting weights, we are tearing down the muscle fibers. We are not growing during the workout. We're growing during the recovery. So if you're not giving your body recovery time, it's not going to grow very well. And if you keep damaging that one area, you're more susceptible to injury as well. So effective overload methods: increasing your reps within a target range, increasing your weight once at the top of the rep range is reached, increase your total sets, so your volume. You can slow the tempo to increase time under tension, which is one of my favorites, especially on the eccentric. On the way down is the time to do it. And slightly reduce rest periods. Again, all effective. You don't need to do everything at once, but if you want to get into the nitty-gritty specifics, the recommended training ranges 6 to 15 repetitions for hypertrophy. It can be anywhere in between the two, but you don't want to go less than 6. You don't need to go more than 15. 60 to 80% of your 1 rep max. Now, you might not know what that is. Quite honestly, I don't really know what that is because I haven't tried to do a 1 rep max, but you know where it's pretty, you're up there. And I always say if your goal is 12 repetitions, if you are not struggling or starting to feel some struggle halfway through, you're not going heavy enough. Okay. So let's say you do your first set and you get to 12, or let's say 15, that was your goal, and you just drop the weight and you're like, wow, that was much easier than last week. That's awesome. No, no, if it was easier, or regardless of if you're comparing it to a time or not, if you get through that set and you just feel like, wow, that was pretty easy, like I'm proud of myself, I felt strong, that's the time to bump it up. Okay, great. Like, applaud yourself. It's fantastic, but we need to bump it up. So you should feel struggle. You should always have at least a rep or two left in you, 1 to 3 reps in reserve. Okay. So you don't need to train to complete failure. Sometimes it's fun to throw in a failure set and you just go to failure. And I love doing that. You challenge your body. A lot of different methods to do that. So how to track your progress is right there. If you get into that, totally cool. Within our app, we have a way to track that. So if you're interested in that, again, you can find information below. The strength segment here, many of you want to feel stronger. And again, your goal still might be muscle growth, but obviously you're going to get stronger with that as well. So the strength development is driven by your nervous system efficiency, your motor unit recruitment, and your high mechanical load. So effective overload methods, again, increasing your weight, primary driver, decrease your reps, and increase your rest periods to allow full recovery. So you can see here the training ranges 1 to 6 reps, 80 to 95% of 1 rep max. 2 to 5 minutes of rest between sets. Okay. So if strength is your goal, it will require much more time for rest as opposed to muscle growth. Okay. Hypertrophy. So just keep that in mind. Again, different goals, different methods. Cardiovascular endurance, increased oxygen utilization, improved mitochondrial function, enhanced cardiovascular efficiency. And the effective overload methods, increase workout duration. So if you want to feel more endurance growing, then instead of doing a 30-minute run, bump it up to a 40-minute run and slowly progress. Same thing. If you want to be doing weights, but you want to increase that cardiovascular, weights can help you with cardiovascular, but obviously a lot more is going to be done with just your running, your biking, your jogging, your swimming, things like that. So the effective overload methods, again, increasing duration, intensity, frequency, and reducing rest periods. So you can still help that by doing supersets. And that's why I love doing supersets, because you can increase your cardiovascular endurance as well as your muscular endurance. So down here, that's another focus. And again, increasing repetitions, time under tension, reducing your rest periods, use circuits or high rep training. So again, it's all very superset driven, 12 to 25 plus repetitions. So again, many of you don't necessarily need to do more than 15 reps, but for some people, you might be training for something specific and you really want to have that muscular endurance. So that's totally fine. But sometimes if your goal is muscular endurance and hypertrophy, you're going to get into a little slippery slope if you're going one extreme or the other. So you have to find that good balance between the two. Your power, your explosiveness, I'll let you guys read into this. I'm going to have a link below in the caption so you can go into all the nitty gritty details that you want. But I know many of you aren't so focused on power, explosiveness, because I don't have a lot of athletes who are still doing things like volleyball training, and you need to be able to jump pretty high. But that could be useful if your children, or maybe you do it on the side, who knows. And then supersets versus traditional training at the bottom, like we talked about. So how fast to progress, Obviously, everyone's in a different boat, but don't push it too quick because you're going to burn yourself out and you could get injured. 10% per week is how quickly you should probably do that. And if you are interested in a weekly tracking system, this is kind of how to break it up. Okay. So hopefully this was helpful. Again, check the caption for more information. There will be a link to this guide as well. And if you are wanting programming customized to you, your goals, and what you actually enjoy doing, then just comment below and I will send you information. Have a good day.